Welcome to R&R Living Life. We begin this episode as Rick and I spend some time checking out the sights around Halls Creek before making our way to Ngumban Cliffs and on to Roebuck Plains Roadhouse. We first made our way out to the Halls Creek Rodeo Grounds and Helicopter Pilot Memorial on the outskirts of town. Having known quite a number of helicopter pilots and having been to many camp drives and rodeos, it brought back quite a few memories. From the sports ground, we made our way the 6 kilometres out to China Wall, accessed off the Duncan Highway. Considered to be one of Australia's oldest natural exposed subvertical white quartz veins and part of what might be the world's longest single fault of its type, when over 300 million years ago silica-rich fluids filled cracks in older sandstone. Tectonic uplift exposed the area and subsequent erosion wore away the softer sandstone, leaving the harder quartz standing proud. This ancient quartz spine that rises to 6 metres above the surrounding country and then disappearing back into the earth again stretches for kilometres, offering a unique visual contrast with the rich red Kimberley landscape. The place acquired its English name because it is somewhat reminiscent of the Great Wall of China. We had seen similar outcrops of quartz as we travelled through the Kimberley region, but not to this extent. It was an amazing formation. From China Wall we made our way back into Halls Creek. Halls Creek is 2 towns. One, the modern Halls Creek, that lies on the Great Northern Highway at the northern edge of the Great Sandy Desert and Tanami Desert. The town services the surrounding pastoral industry and the tourism needs of passing travellers, making the long journey across the Kimberley from Kununurra to Derby and Broome. The other Halls Creek is a dry, unforgiving ghost town and was the site of Western Australia's first gold discovery in 1885, and for a brief period it became the prospecting grounds to more than 15,000 people from all over the world. Today all that remains are the ruins of the foundations of the old mine shaft, sections of the old post office and the cemetery where many Kimberley pioneers were buried. In 1948 the original town was physically moved 15 kilometres to its present location. The translocation continued until the old township was finally abandoned in 1954. Halls Creek was also the last stop for drovers driving cattle along the legendary Canning Stock Route, a bucket list trek, the longest stock route in the world, stretching over 1,700 kilometres through the vast open spaces of the Gibson, Great Sandy and Tanami deserts, between Halls Creek in the north and Wooloona in the south. The trek was created in 1910 to connect a string of 51 wells located a day's walk apart for watering stock en route to the markets, but was only used for a short time for droving stock before the Port of Wyndham provided an easier option for transporting cattle south. But it remains one of the greatest pioneering feats of the 19th century. Sometimes when I think I have seen it all, only to be surprised by more stunning scenery, and the next 290 kilometres to Fitzroy Crossing was no different. I could only imagine the hardship of Russian Jack, who legend has it pushed his sick mate from Halls Creek to Wyndham through rough terrain in a wheelbarrow to seek medical attention, especially when there were no roads as such. In this isolated remote region, it is hard to comprehend the difficulties faced by those gold miners, settlers and pastoralists to the region. They brought with them a completely different way of life, having never had to live off the land like the indigenous people. Coming from a vastly different country, with a considerably different climate, to a country filled with unknown hardships, we can only imagine based on our own experiences. However, I think they fall far short of what it was actually like. Even though we were travelling through what appeared to be the same region, the Kimberley, I tried to understand why and how the country is so different. The scenery was stunning, ranges and arid red sand plains covered in a large variety of vegetation, the expansive elevated Kimberley Plateau, a region of largely undisturbed sandstone terrain that rises abruptly from the surrounding plains, creating stark elevated plateaus, deeply incised by rivers that have created dramatic gorges and mesas. The region is primarily composed of sandstone laid down during the Precambrian era, a time when the Earth's crust was still forming and life as we know it was just beginning, up until the Paleozoic era. It blows me away, the geology of the region, if not the whole of Australia. We had studied Australia in social studies at school, learning about the rivers, deserts, seas, and the inland sea, but really we had only touched the surface of this vast continent. The geological formation of the Kimberley is a story of ancient forces sculpturing a landscape over millennia. Approximately 2.5 to 1.6 billion years ago, the Kimberley Carton, a significant geological formation whereby a stable block of ancient continental crust formed the core of the region, occurred. Then that was shaped by repeated exposures of tectonic compression and thermal events, which contributed to the formation of its complex, metamorphic and igneous rock structure. Once the Kimberley Carton stabilised, the region experienced pretty significant volcanic activity and extensive sedimentation processes. Over time, volcanic eruptions deposited layers of lava and ash, which were interspersed with sediments washed in from eroding land masses nearby. These layers compacted and cemented over millions of years and formed many of the sedimentary rock formations, with their distinctive appearance caused by the relentless forces of weathering and erosion. The climate changes over millennia, including periods of intense rainfall and droughts, sculptured the sandstone into the dramatic scenery before us. It is really interesting trying to understand the processes and sometimes hard to get my head around. Millions of years in the making. We had crossed the Mary River, a tributary of the Margaret River that rises south of Halls Creek. The river was named in 1884 when the area was explored by a government survey party led by Harry Johnston, who named it after his mother Mary. We seemed to be travelling on a plateau, as out on the horizon we could see another line of red cliffs. Shallow creeks like the Barangi and Mosquito Creek flowed across the landscape. It appeared to be mainly rocky country, with some drier, flatter country covered with hardy, drought-resistant flora like shrubs, spinifex, grasses and scattered eucalypts or acacia trees. The country was forever changing. We stopped and camped for the night at Ngumban Ciffs rest area that looks over the Great Northern Highway and out across the alluvial plains. The escarpment is composed of a sedimentary rock that has undergone a weathering process known as lateralization that involves the leaching of soluble minerals from the rock, leaving behind a residual concentration of iron and aluminium oxides. The resulting deposits, known as laterites, are characterized by their distinctive red or brown color due to the prevalence of these iron oxides. Weathering has left behind a hard iron-rich crust within the deeply weathered landscape. The cliffs form the edge of an elevated plateau where we could see far into the distance, overlooking a huge gorge towards the Lawford Range and the Mueller Ranges that forms an elevated erosional plain that separates the Ord River Valley from the interior desert and is at the southeastern edge of the King Leopold Range Plateau. We wandered the edge of the cliffs and watched as long road trains climbed the steep incline to the top. As afternoon turned to dusk, we enjoyed a spectacular sunset. The untouched splendour of the area was incredible. What a breathtaking overnight experience. The following day, as we left Ngumban Ciffs, the scenery was stunning as the sun rose higher. The colours were vibrant, rich reds, oranges and yellows. Gradually, we began seeing changes in the countryside. No longer were the ranges before us, but further away on the horizon. What a day it turned out to be as we travelled through wide and well-grassed alluvial flats into very rough, rocky and hilly country, with striking prominent ridges and sandstone plateaus in the distance. The rocky ridges were sparsely covered in spinifex, small pockets of grass and scattered stunted gum and small trees, but the valleys looked to support reasonably good pastures, and the watercourses were marked by stands of large trees. It was here we could see where there was once an inland sea, the huge areas ringed by ranges. This was more like the Kimberley I had envisaged in my younger days, a vast, rugged and remote region of over 420,000 square kilometres, about 3 times the size of England. I certainly had not expected the ancient mountains, sandstone gorges, tropical grasslands and the huge river valleys like that of the Ord River. The first recorded European contact in Western Australia was in 1616, when Dutch explorer Dirk Hartog landed on the west coast, having been blown off course while on his way to Batavia, currently called Jakarta. A multitude of Dutch visits followed during that century, charting virtually the whole of the west coast, the West Australian south coast and Australia's northern coast. Although many expeditions visited the coast during the next 200 years, there was no lasting attempt at establishing a permanent settlement until the late 1800s, driven by pastoralism, pearling and gold discoveries. Alexander Forrest's expedition in 1879, which travelled from the West Kimberley coast to the Northern Territory border, produced growing reports of vast, well-watered pastoral land along the Fitzroy and Ord rivers, triggering a rush for land leases. As we approached Fitzroy Crossing, the land flattened out again with vast floodplains covered in grass and stocked with a huge number of cattle. There were also a few more one-lane bridges, in fact 2 or 3 very close to the town, before crossing the new Fitzroy River Bridge. Hard to believe that it was washed away by the catastrophic flooding from ex-tropical cyclone Ellie in late December 2022, early January 23, with the river's immense volume and force ripping out the bridge that serves as a vital Great Northern Highway link for the Kimberley region. Thankfully, it was quickly rebuilt and reopened in December 2023. We only stopped to fuel up as we were returning back through the crossing on our return, when we will have a closer look at the bridge. Fitzroy Crossing owes its name to the mighty Fitzroy River, set up where the Great Northern Highway crosses it. This small town is in the red soil region of the Kimberley. We were well and truly in cattle country, where cattle stations are vast, often featuring Brahman or drought masters, and more recently for Wagyu breeding, and incorporating significant Aboriginal land management alongside some tourist-friendly options for camping on a working cattle station. The country became lusher and more dramatic, transitioning to river-fed floodplains, boab trees and ancient rock formations of the Devonian Reef influenced by the Fitzroy River. Midway between Halls Creek and Fitzroy Crossing, we had passed through Louisa Downs Station and then through Gogo Station, also known as Margaret Downs, with floodplain country of the Fitzroy River covered in Mitchell and Flinders grass and large areas of spinifex. As like most cattle stations since their establishment in the late 1880s, the country has seen many good and bad seasons with drought, floods and bushfire. Life on cattle stations is always challenging, if not a little isolated to some, but such a rewarding lifestyle. Days are long and often very hot, centred on cattle work, either mustering via helicopter with support from horse and motorbikes, while at the homestead the upkeep of power, solar or generators while maintaining the gardens. Enduring the dramatic wet dry seasons, to live out here you need to have a deep connection or love of working on the land. The stations have a strong community feel, and nowadays with the evolving modern dynamics that include Indigenous ownership and modern technologies, the need to develop one's resilience against floods, droughts and bushfires are all a way of life under the vast Kimberley sky. Our next stop was at the large boab called the Halfway Tree in the locality of Kimberley, between Wallare and Fitzroy Crossing. Its distinctive bottle-shaped trunk and historical significance make it a cherished landmark in the region. It is a mammoth-sized tree, as you can see from the photo of Rick standing in the opening into the tree. At 6'4", though tall for a man, he is dwarfed by the sheer size of the tree. Unfortunately, people have written all over it for years, and while we were there, used it as a climbing frame. For such an iconic tree, I would have thought people would have had more respect for it, having had to stand the test of years of various weather patterns and the harsh climate of the Kimberley. This ancient deciduous tree is a vital part of the landscape, supporting both the unique ecosystem and human history in the area. It really was an amazing tree. I was surprised to find out that boab trees develop hollowed centres, primarily because their soft spongy inner wood decays, often starting from fungi, insects or injuries, while the tough outer layer of sapwood and bark remains alive, creating a large water-storing cavity that is actually a fusion of multiple stems. These hollows are natural in older trees and provide shelter for animals. From the boab tree we made our way to Wallare Roadhouse, located about 100 metres east of a series of channels in the Fitzroy River. The bridge over the river was severely threatened by flooding during the record floods of late December 2022, early January 23, with floodwaters reaching 16.6 metres, just short of the deck at 17.02 metres, meaning it came very close. Unfortunately, significant sections of about 10 kilometres of the nearby road was washed away between the bridge and Cockatoo Creek. Rick and I will leave you here at Wallare Roadhouse. Join us next time as we make our way to Roebuck Plains Roadhouse and spend a couple of days exploring Broome. I hope you have enjoyed the photos in this episode. Give us a thumbs up if you have. Live your best life. Cheers for now. Rick and Rosemary. R&R, living life.